Hello everybody, welcome back. This is Mystic Games. I'm coming at you today with another Cardpocalypse video. This one's going to be on the Pipsqueaks. The Pipsqueaks are the swarm, increase food cost of your enemy, kill your enemy with essentially generally low cost minions, and then have really heavy hitter minions at the end. Although I never played that way. That being said, I am missing two of the leaders here. I am missing Valor, who is a rare leader, and I am missing the Brood, which is the blue legendary, which is probably one of the strongest of the leaders here. Anyways, so we're going to start with the Brood because we don't have them. What the Brood does is it deploys... When you deploy a card, it will give you a 1/1 in return, and then when it goes Mega, it at the start of your turn deploys a 1/2 minion with Swarm, and it also on Mega deploys a bunch of 1/2 minions with Swarm, so your board just gets filled with Swarm minions. This can be really good to trigger. You kind of want your enemy to trigger this with like their final attack, hit your boss or hit your champion, and then you go Mega, and then they end their turn. Then you just have a full board of a bunch of minions. You sacrifice one essentially to clear the board, and then you just start summoning more minions to feed the swarm. Anyways, that's the Brood. Then we'll go with Lab Rat. He's a legendary as well, which I do have, which I don't think I really use. I use Talk a lot. Lab Rat's okay though. What Lab Rat does is minion cards that cost 4 food or more cost 1 less. And then when he goes Mega, he does the same thing, but then reduces it by 2. He destroys all your minions on the board, though, and deploys a 10/10. I actually think the main reason I don't use him is because I feel like that's really negative for how this faction tends to work. It is a good finisher, kind of, in a sense, but because you're going Mega, and it's not when they go Mega that you deploy 10/10. It's kind of like you might not even be able to finish them with this minion, and then you just lost your whole board. But his actual ability is pretty good. Next we'll do Valor. Valor is one of the rares. I do not have Valor. I do know how to get him because I saw him in my third playthrough where I collected the Meowtons. But what he does is every time you lose a minion, he gains 1 attack until the end of his turn, pretty much. So he just builds up his attack for next turn, and then his champion can get a big swing in. And then when he goes Mega, at the start of his turn, his minions gain 1 attack. His minions with 1 attack gain the Defender trait, and he also deploys a 1/8 when he transforms. Next is Frankenstow. Frankenstow is when you reveal. He's like the mutations for the Pipsqueaks. When you reveal a face-down mutation, your minions gain 1 attack. When one of your minions is destroyed, a random friendly minion gains 1/1 as his Mega. And deploy a random minion from your deck. He's pretty decent. I mean, everything he does is okay. Bunnable, I think, increases your food. Yeah, that's what he does. So what Bunnable does is when he's on his regular form, he increases max food by 1. When he goes Mega, you lose the 1 maximum food, by the way, when he goes Mega. It does lower your food. When you deploy a minion, spend all your remaining food and give your minion that much extra attack. And on transform, he refills his food. This is actually more useful to trigger on your turn than the enemy's triggering it for you. So just because you're going to refill your food on the beginning of your turn either way, you kind of want to trigger your Mega if possible to refill your food and then deploy a very powerful minion. Tak is who I use most of the game. He's, as you can see, I don't have another deck. He's a common. He has Swarm. So every time you play a minion, he gains 1 attack. This allows him to help you control the board early on and get rid of other minions, and allows you to keep your minions from dying. It's very useful to have Swarm on him. Megatalk just gives all your minions charge whenever you play them, and you draw 2 cards. So it just lets you fuel essentially a final. This is kind of the same idea as Lab Rat, but it's more consistent because it gives you charge and it gives you control. Like, it doesn't clear your whole board and then says, okay, well, good luck, spend the rest of your food and try to kill him. It says, keep your board, get charged now, and draw 2 cards. So I used Talk most of the game just because his ability was very good. Hair Force is the basic. It's when your minions have Swarm, give them 1 health. This is good because it gives them more board presence for Swarm, which is what Swarm's all about. More minions on the board, buffing up other minions' attack. And then he goes Mega, and all minions with Swarm gain a 1/1. And he deploys 2 minions with Swarm, which are generally going to be 1/2s because they get upgraded. So, and then we'll go through mutations. Mutations, they're the cheap faction, so you can see there's a lot of minions mixed in with mutations here. And that there's a reason is because they're cheap. Bloodspore, when your champion attacks, deploy 2 1/1s. This is rare. I actually don't think this card's that good. I didn't really use it. It's okay. It's good for feeding Swarm, but I just generally didn't need to feed Swarm. I'd have enough board control with the way I was building my deck to not have to worry about that. Decontamination is really good. This destroys a face-down mutation of your enemy. So pretty much you play this, and then if on their turn they play a mutation, it just cancels their mutation. So you're just negating their effect, which can be very strong for this faction. This faction just controls everything. So this is a solid card. I don't think I actually used this card in this deck, to be honest, if I remember. I think I might have, and then I removed it later because I just didn't need it anymore because my deck became so powerful it was unnecessary. Essence Cannon is when you deploy 3 or less attack minion, your champion gains 2 attack for 2 turns. It's essentially his turn and then the enemy's turn, and then it goes away. It's not very good. I didn't use it. I don't like when you gain 2 attack and then it disappears. There's other cards in the game that do 2 attack and it's permanent, so I recommend those by changing the faction on them later as more useful cards. This isn't a bad card, just depends on your playstyle though. Mitosis is brokenly strong in my opinion. It's when you deploy a minion that costs 3 food or less, you deploy a copy. And this counts for reduction. So if you have a 4-cost minion that you put a 1-cost minus sticker on and it now is 3-cost, you're essentially summoning 2 4-cost minions. This is very, very powerful. I think I had 2 of this in my deck, and then I think I had 2 of Stasis, which we'll read in a second, but it's essentially the same idea. This fuels getting very powerful cards because you're paying essentially you're paying 1 food to get 2 3-cost minions if you play your cards properly, which is just insanely strong. And as I said, if you sticker something down 2 for 3, you're essentially getting 2 4-cost minions, 1 for 3 costs, and then 1 for 1. So it's just a lot of stats on the board very quickly once you get this card. Very good card. Very good to change this card to another faction. Just good card all around. Ooh. Then you have Nuker. I don't like Nuker. When your champion is attacked, you have at least 1 minion, gain 1 maximum food. This is a good card. I just don't like that you have to have a minion on board. I wish it was just when your champion is attacked, you gain 1 food. Having the at least 1 minion can be very bad because a lot of the times the computer will try to clear the minion on the board if they are able, and therefore it sits there sometimes and it can just be very useless. It's very good if you pull it on turn 1 because you're not going to be able to really do anything else anyways, but other than that I don't think it's very good. Rift Control is when you have no cards in your hand, you deploy 3 1/2s with Swarm. This is very, very strong. I didn't use this card, but I think it's a very good card. By the time I got this card, I didn't need it for how my deck worked for me to actually have it in my deck to function well. But it is a solid card. There's so many uses for this. I do recommend putting it in your deck. If you haven't built a deck that seems like it's helping with consistency, this will probably help you keep board control. And then Stasis. I actually think this is one of the strongest ones along with Mitosis. When one of your minions is destroyed, deploy a copy of the minion, right? So, for example, you have a 10-cost minion you play, right? We'll just go with this. You have a 9 cost minion, you play this on 10, so you have 10 food. You drop this down and you drop that minion. You know that minion's going to die, right? But they're going to have to trade a bunch of minions into it. The AI doesn't know that you have stasis down. It will generally trade into the big minion if it can't kill you, just to remove the minion, especially if it feels threatened, like it's close to death. And it will trade into that minion, die, and then stasis will trigger and summon another one of it. Just another free minion. There's some wonky combos with this card as well that I was using. I made this card a Pipsqueak card, and I was just able to copy it, and I had infinite phoenixes for 2 costs in my hand, and it was just nuts. So there's that too. We're gonna go back and look at the minions though. So one of my favorite cards, and I buffed this to a lot, as you guys can see. I got this. This is like a 3 cost card, I want to say. Yeah, we'll look at it here. What this card does is it's a 3 cost. It makes enemy minions cost 1 more food. It's a common card. It's a 2/4. So its stats are equal to its cost, and then it just has an effect that makes the enemy have a harder time getting anything on the board. When you sticker this and you mutate or you change the rules, you can get this thing up to, and you can probably get it higher than this, but I got it to a 1 cost 4/6. This was my card for the game most of the time that I was using with one of the rule changes where you get to pin a card to your deck. And I actually think I switched out my legendary custom card and I put this card as the main thing in my deck. Like, turn 1, drop this, boom, they can't do anything for multiple turns. And I have Swarm on it, so it just hits hard. It was just extremely powerful to drop on turn 1, and it gave me massive board control. I honestly could have added another one of this to my deck and it still would have been helpful, because then you would have +2 to them. It just gets nuts. I think I might have had 2. I'll show you my deck at the end though. I don't even remember. I haven't used this in such a long time. This is my first playthrough. This is the one I streamed, so you guys will probably know my deck better than me if you watch my playthrough. The Duplicant is a very, very powerful card as well. I added Charge to it, which is what I would recommend for this card. It's a 1 cost. I think it's a 3 cost card as well, but I got it down to 1. And it has Charge, Swarm. It summons another minion with Swarm, which is essentially the same thing. And then it summons my base one was a 3/3, so it's a 4 because it summons this, gets a 4, that gets a 2/2. It just starts scaling quickly, and they're very cheap to do. So it's a very strong card for very cheap you can get. Dynamite is a very good card as well. It's a cheap card. When it runs into the enemy, it dies. It deals its damage to the champion. So you can essentially run this into a champion. It will generally survive 1 more hit. So they either have to deal with it, or they have to ignore it. And then if they ignore it and they don't have a defender, you're going to run into him again for another 4. It's going to die and deal. This would deal, if this runs into a champion every time, and the champion is not in its mega stage yet, you're going to deal a total of 12 damage just with this. Not counting that I had Swarm on mine, so this number could get up to like 5, 6, and then die and deal another 6 damage. So on average, this card is probably dealing, I don't know, probably initially it would probably hit for 4, or probably would hit for 5. It would probably survive most of the time, and then it would hit again for 5. It was generally dealing probably 5 to, it's probably dealing 15 damage almost on average to the champion, enemy champion, which is half their health. The Easter Bunny is like essentially the burglary, but for mutations. It's a 1 cost card that makes enemy mutations cost 1 more. I wish this was actually a 1/3 statted card, but it does have very good stats for its cost. It's a 1 cost card. It does 1/2. The issue with enemy mutations compared to enemy minion cost is that all mutations cost 1. So really, this card, to be really good, would probably have to be up 2+ to mutations. which would increase the cost of this card. But I would actually prefer this to be like a 2-cost card with a little bit better health even. Even if they gave this a 1/3 and then made this a 2 and had made it a 2-cost card, it would have been way better than what it is right here. But it's still a good card. It pretty much forces them to deal with it. Otherwise, their mutations are going to cost more. Essentially, if you go on turn 1 and you have this card in your hand, your enemy can't do anything because their mutations will cost 2, and all their minions are generally going to cost 2. So it's a good for slowing down your enemy. Essence Cannon is... Oh, that's not a minion. We already went over those. Guinea Pig is a 1-cost 3/3, but he's hungry for 2 food. So pretty much what he does is every turn he takes away 2 food before you even get it. He's a decent card. I did use him in my deck when I got him because initially I don't think I had anything better. He's okay to drop if you know he's going to die. He would be good with like a defender. If you give him a defender sticker, I feel like, because then it forces the enemy to clear it for you. And essentially they're just going to die most of the time running into him because he's so cheap. So I would argue that if you keep him on the board for 1 turn, he's worth the value because he's, you know, a 3-cost for 6 in stats. But if you get him on the board with... If you get him on the board for 1 turn for you, have Defender on, that the enemy has to run his minions into it, you actually probably gained food. Because you'll get your full food next turn, and then he'll have killed the enemy team pretty much for you. Anyways. We have Ratton. We'll go with the regular one. It did get reduced due to rule changes throughout the game. I think this is normally a 1... I want to say this is a 2-cost 2/2 with Swarm. Obviously I made it stronger with my rule changes. I increased and decreased the cost on it. Whenever you guys see purple, that means that throughout the playthrough there are rule changes, and I put rule changes to increase the damage of Swarm, increase the health of Swarm, and reduce the cost of Swarm cards. So that's why this card is not the actual numbers. It would be a 2, 2, and 2, just so everybody knows. I will explain that as I go through cards, just so everyone's very clear on that. He's a good card. He's a common card. Unupgraded, he's okay. He's equal to the stats. You know, he's just a good basic Swarm card. We already went over Duplicant. Duplicant's really good. Phoenix is a Woofian card. We went over him last time. You put Defender on him. He gets Defender. He dies. He goes back to your hand. You put Lethal on him. You decrease his cost. You increase his health. And you increase his attack. And he just is a godly card. Nibbles is a very good common card for... I don't like when I try to move over and then it goes away. Nibbles is a very good common card. What it does is when it dies, it gives 1 maximum food to your overall food count. For what it is, it's a relatively good card. I would probably upgrade its... like I put Lethal, so I gave it more health just so it would trade better. You might be able to kill 2 things instead of 1, essentially. But Nibbles is a good card. I also had one with Defender, so you had to kill it, which would then guarantee me the maximum food. Powser is a hiding card that at the start of your turn deploys a 1/1 minion with charge. So it feeds your Swarm minions, because they will get credit for that being summoned onto the board every turn. The 1/1 charge will give 1 Swarm. And it gives you a free card to essentially trade into something every turn. But it's really there to power up your Swarm. You can keep him hidden and potentially buff him up. There's not as many ways to buff these guys in play as like the Woofians, but if you can buff him up a little bit, and then you can use him to like finish the enemy as well. So he has multiple uses, but he's just kind of, you put him on the board. I recommend reducing his cost as much as possible. I think he's normally a 4-cost card. But he's very, very strong. Bad stats, but the value of this with Swarm is very strong. Vampirella is a attack, so pretty much it has a 2/1/2, and what it is here for is you put it on the board. You either go face with it next turn and you hit the champion. The champion either and then you get a card draw from it, or the enemy runs into it, probably kills one of their weaker minions to get rid of it, and you get a card from it. So it just helps cycle your deck, and it kills. It does a decent job at killing minions. This would be another good card to like throw lethal on, because then it guarantees it's going to kill something, and it guarantees that you're drawing a card to replace it, whereas the enemy loses the card, doesn't regain a card, and you do. So, we already went over Burglary. Devour is not a good card in my opinion. Its attack is made equal to its food, but it's a 3-cost card. This would have been a good card had it had more health. Like, this should have been a 0-4, because every turn, like if you drop this on turn 3, you can't use it because you have no food, so it's going to be a 0. And as I said, stats are usually double what the cost is, so this should be a 6-6 in stats. It's a 0-3. This has to wait a turn to get stats for the attack. They should have gave this a 4, at least, if not a 5. You could really gave it a 6, and it would have been... I think 6 would have been too strong for probably the timing in the game. But giving it like a 4 or a 5 would have probably been better. But it's an okay card. It just has to survive a turn. It generally doesn't. Fetid Ferret is a, I believe, 4-cost card normally with a 1-4. That when it dies, it deploys a 4-1. It's a solid card. I used it a lot earlier on, and then I got rid of it, I think, later when I got better options. Hippo Ratmouse is a rare card that I love the idea of. It requires stickers, though. It literally requires stickers to function. When you try to run this card at regular stats, and I want to say it's a 5-cost card normally, and I want to say it's like a 4-4. I think it's a 5-4-4, right? So the stats are worse than what it would be normally. I buffed mine, so mine's super good, but without buffing it, it's okay. I wouldn't put this, like, I originally put this in my deck when I first started, because I got it pretty early on, I feel like. I think I might have got it on Tuesday, like the first day you actually build your deck, and I was like, oh, this card's going to be awesome, and then it just died. Like, it never was helpful. What you're supposed to do with this card is you put it on the board, it has Swarm on it, and then you use it to attack, either clear a minion or go face into the champion, and then you drop minions to buff, to heal it. So you're actually not really gaining the Swarm, if that makes sense, because Swarm requires you drop a minion for it to gain the attack. You normally are going to want to attack, let it take damage, and then drop minions to heal it back up. By putting stickers on it, like I did here, I just want to explain this, it allows me to not attack immediately, to hit something, because I already have 6 and 8. I can go right into the champion's face. I don't have to worry about taking damage, right? So I can get this up, drop like 3 minions, really cheap minions on the board potentially, get it up to like a 9 or an 8, hit the champion, take no damage because it has ambush, and I don't have to worry about healing, right? So I don't have to worry about this second part. They go into it to try to kill it next turn, but are unable to clear him. I can then choose next turn to drop minions to heal it and give it Swarm. It just works better. It needs higher stats. So Hippo Ratmouse is good, but you need to sticker it. Without stickers, it's average. Just so everybody knows. If you sticker it, especially the way I stickered, I would say it's above average. Hoover is the basic upgrade for your neutral cards you get early on. It's okay to have one in your deck. It just doesn't help later. Like, you're going to find better cards to replace this. Most of your deck's going to probably become whatever faction you're playing, and therefore this becomes not as helpful. Womp is a good card. Womp it gains 2/2 if they have a mutation down, if the enemy has a mutation. And for the cost, that's really good. The issue is, depending on what enemy you're facing, this actually could be detrimental. So he's very situational, and if you're facing the Meowtents, I would argue he's not that good, because you can drop them because they have a mutation. And the Meowtents, as you will see in the next video, have a lot of stealing the enemy's minions kind of cards for mutations. So you could drop this down, buff it to a 5/4, and then it gets stolen from the enemy and just hits you in the face next turn. So it's a double-edged sword. For the Meowtons, this is really bad. For a lot of other people, like the Woofians and stuff, it's very good. So it's a situational card. So I used it for a minute, and then I took it out when I got better cards. We talked about this last time, and I had Ambush on my Woofians run. This one I put Hiding on it. Hiding is way better for this card, just so everybody knows. And I gave it a Pipsqueak sticker there to be able to use it in my decks to buff all my cards. Bugs is pretty solid. He's a legendary blue minion that you get. He's made up of bugs. Ooh, as you can see. Just different bugs, which it's a cool art thing too. I decreased his cost by 1, I want to say, and then I had the mutation that decreased it by another. I think he's a 6 cost card normally. I gave him Swarm, and I buffed him up to an 8/8. I can't remember if he's a 7/7 or if he's a 6/6, to be honest. When this minion attacks, your other minions gain 2 attack until the end of the turn. What I will say about this is he would probably be better with Charge than he would be with Swarm. Because Swarm makes him wait a turn, whereas if I had Charge on him, I drop him, I hit the enemy, and then all my other minions on board gain 2 attack temporarily for the turn. I kind of wish this would have been gains 1 attack permanently. I think this card, if you had this card with gains 1 attack permanently, would actually be better than gain 2 attack until the end of the turn. But it's supposed to be a kind of a finisher card. I would recommend that if you guys end up getting bugs, that you put Charge on it, though. That'd be the difference here. I gotta go a little quicker, man. I'm running so much on the analyzation. I think blue has more, like, in-depth than red does. Like, it's a lot more finessing play-wise than red. Red's like, buff your cards, buff your cards, buff your cards, kill the enemy. Whereas blue is more about trickery, in a sense, and swarming your board. So there's more nuance to how the effects work. Your Revenge abilities activate twice. Revenge deploys a 1/1. So when this dies, you get 2 1/1s. It's a legendary. I don't think it's that good. There's not enough Revenge cards, I feel like, where this is useful. They would have to add more Revenge cards to blue to make this a better card. Decoy is a 4-cost 4/4, so its stat line is good, but it destroys an enemy face-down mutation. The issue is a lot of times mutations go away before this card would die. So unless you can pretty much guarantee this card's death to counter a mutation, you probably won't be able to counter a mutation. Fungas, at the start of your turn, if the enemy has a face-down mutation, deploy 2 1/1s. This is a good card, but it relies on your enemy having a face-down mutation. Therefore, it's situational, and I don't like situational cards, but it is a good card, especially against these champions that use a lot of mutations, which there are 1 for each faction. So, yeah, it could be solid in a deck versus them. Yeah, he's a 5/4/4 normally. That's what he is. Just so you can see him, because you guys saw my giant buffed up one, but he's a 5/4/4 really. I can tell by looking at the regular card. Spaying Mantis is a 4-cost 6/6 card normally. I put Defender on mine intentionally because I did use this for a minute, and the reason I put Defender on it was because at the end of the turn, it destroys one of my minions. So what I would normally do is on turn 4, if I don't have board control, I would throw this minion down, because it costs 4 anyways. I have nothing on the board to destroy. It won't kill anything. It sits there. They run into it. Most of the time, it's going to be almost dead by the next turn, and then I run it into their enemy champion, or I run it into another minion if anything did survive, kill the other minion, and then this thing dies with it, and I don't have to worry about killing a minion. And I essentially cleared the whole enemy's board. This got replaced with Phoenix later, because Phoenix is better at doing that. Blight Eyes is a common bunny that got radioactively mutated by the blight. By the goo, sorry. It has Charge and Revenge. It draws a card. This is an okay card. For the cost, the stats are horrible, because it should be a 5/5. It has Charge, and when it dies, it draws a card. It's not bad early on, because you will get it early, but it's just not good enough, in my opinion, to keep. Bubonus is a legendary card that you can only deploy if you have 5 other minions, so you require the board to be full, except for the final slot, and then you can play this for 5 for a 10-10. Stats are good for the cost, obviously, because it should be a 5-5 if it's a 5, and it's a 10-10, so it has double stats. The issue is, this is not a hard requirement to get to, I would say, but you're generally not going to be able to do it. You like fill your board and then drop this. You're going to have to fill your board, hope something dies next turn, or you're going to summon to be able to kill it and then drop this. In a low-cost swarm deck with like using the mutations that summon more stuff, this could be a really good card. But again, I feel like it's very situational, and you're really relying on building your deck to get this out. And then if this dies to like a lethal minion or something that just kills it, you just lose. Corrodent, which is one of my favorite cards, along with Burglary, is a defender. 5 cost, enemy minion cost 1 more. I like to reduce the cost of this card, increase the damage, and increase the health. And I think it's really good because it increases costs of the enemy, which makes that a lot harder for them to play around. I use this card a lot in my deck. I think I did end up removing it later because it just wasn't necessary anymore, but it's a very good card early on. Flooper Swarm. Swarm, deploy a 1/2 with Swarm. I couldn't even tell you what the stats are on this. I think this is a horrible card for like, I think the cost is like a 6, and I don't think the stats are that good for what it does. I mean, if it just, I think it would have to deploy 2 of these for it to be cost effective. Anyways, I didn't really use this card. I wouldn't recommend this card. I'm not saying it doesn't have its purpose, I just don't think it's that good. Flux Vermin is when your enemy reveals a face-down mutation, you draw a card. It's one off in stats, so it's bad on stats. When your enemy reveals a mutation, that's kind of bad generally. I mean, I guess that kind of negates the bad for you, but I don't think it's that good. I never really used Flux Vermin in my deck. I didn't think it was necessary. It's also a situational thing. They have to have a mutation, and then you get to draw a card, which I'm not a fan of that. When you deploy a minion with 4 attack or more, you draw a card. This is kind of the same idea. This is stipulations on it, and it requires a high attack minion for you to draw a card. This isn't a bad card in itself, though. It does have equal stats to its cost, and it can be used, and if you reduce the cost of it and everything, you can make this useful. I think I did use that for a minute. I just didn't. I would only draw like 1 or 2 cards, and then it was dead, so it just wasn't, in my opinion, worth it. It was usually a card, and then it died. Mutabolism is hungry for 4 food. It's an early, you get a very strong minion on the board, but it eats food every turn. It's okay. We'll look at the unstickered version. This minion costs 1 less for each minion you control. This is an okay card. Essentially, if you have 5 minions on the board, this becomes a 5 cost 8/8, which is essentially a 2 weaker bonus. So, obviously you get this way later in the game though compared to this, but he's okay. He's an okay card. I didn't really use him. You would have to I feel like if you reduced his cost and then give him increased stats, because he's almost a legendary at that point if you think about it this way. He's a lot better, but he just isn't good enough, I feel like, most of the time. But again, if you're running a swarm deck, he's good. Same idea as Bubonus. He's just a weaker Bubonus. I actually feel like when you look at Bubonus as a legendary card, and then you look at him, their idea is the same thing. And I would argue that you can make him almost as good as Bubonus. So, anyways, guys, this is a super long video. I hope you guys enjoyed learning about the cards. I believe I have all the blue cards. I could be wrong about that. I might be missing something other than the champions, but I believe I got all of the blue cards when I played through. I'll leave it on the end so you guys can look at my deck. This was the deck I was running. I had a Platagundark as my legendary create a card. We'll look at that real quick so you guys can see what he had. It was a Swarm Ambush card. He ended up being a 2 cost, which was really cheap for a 6/7, because obviously he'd be a 4/4 in stats. Or he'd be sorry, he'd be a 2/2 in stats to be equal to his cost, and he ended up being a 6/7, which is insane for his cost. So very, very strong with the deck and everything I got. A lot of my strategy revolved around making more phoenixes by using stasises and mitosises at the end game, and I just won with literally having phoenixes on the board. My whole play style changed. It was originally a swarm deck, and then it turned into get Phoenix on the board, duplicate Phoenix, have 2 Phoenixes, get Bark Angel on the board, and then just buff up my board eternally. Usually get this, 2 of these, him, and then anything else was just there to do a job. Burglary was there to just increase the cost of the enemy's minions. He was good to get on the board because he was just strong. He was good to get on the board. He was just strong. But yeah. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed my Pipsqueak video for Cardpocalypse. I will be doing the Meowtants, and then I actually have to play through one more time to actually unlock all of the purple cards. And I actually did a whole walkthrough video or list telling me what cards you get from every person depending on your choices and playthrough style, which I do plan on uploading to Steam eventually, so that if you want to play through the game and make a, specific deck, you'll have the information to do so without having to do multiple playthroughs like myself. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed. Have a great day. This has been Mystic Games. I'll see you in the next one. Later.